Hello, good morning or afternoon, depending on where you're calling in from. Thank you so much for joining us today. We appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedules. Let's see here. My name is Melinda Cheel. I'm the Senior Manager of Marketing and Communications, and I'm joined by two colleagues, Kate Danaher, Lending Manager, and Meredith Storton, Lending Associates. Today we're going to take about 35 or 40 minutes for the presentation, and then we're going to leave 20 minutes at the end for Q&A. And so in order to ask your questions, please type them into the chat box. Okay, there we go. So if you look at your screen right now, if you don't see your chat box, you can click on the orange arrow and it should expand. And also just a note that if you're having trouble with the audio, please use your phone with the information provided in the registration confirmation email. And also it's best to watch the webinar in full screen if you're able to do so. Before we get started, we'd like to run a quick poll. Just to see who is on the line. So if you're a current client seeking financing, curious about our loan program, or a finance professional, and you can choose any that apply to you. And we'll just take a few seconds to let people select. Right now we have 33 people on the line with us. Okay, I think we'll close the poll now. So 52% are curious about RSF's loan program. Good. Yeah, glad you're here. Okay, I think we'll get started. So first, Meredith.
Hi, everyone. Yeah, just a little bit about RSF. So our mission is to transform the way the world works with money through investing, lending, and giving services that generate positive and social environmental impact, all while fostering community and collaboration amongst participants. So we believe that people are best served by financial transactions that are direct, transparent, personal, and then based on long-term relationships. RSF has been around since 1984. This is our 31st year, and we've made over $275 million in loans to nonprofit and for-profit organizations. We're the lender of choice for social enterprises who seek a mission-aligned financing partner, and we're also a nonprofit ourselves. We serve enterprises working in 3 different focus areas, as you can see on the screen: food and agriculture, education and the arts, and ecological stewardship. And we offer funding loans between $100,000 and $5 million.
Hi, everybody. This is Kate Danaher, Lending Manager. To date, we've made just over $275 million in loans to lots of different borrowers that we're extremely proud of. Right now, we have probably about 82 borrowers in our portfolio, all of which, if you go to our website and do a little bit of digging, you can see everybody that we lend to. But on the screen in front of you are just a few of the amazing opportunities or amazing borrowers that we work with. So RSF over the past several years has spent a lot of time asking ourselves what we consider to be a social enterprise. Every time a new opportunity comes to us to lend money, one of the first things we do before we look at a balance sheet is we identify what kind of a social enterprise it is and how it aligns with RSF's mission to change the way the world works with money. So at RSF, we have a pretty specific definition. So I excuse the script here, but I'm going to read it because I think it's actually pretty powerful, and we think a lot about it. So at RSF, we define a social enterprise as a business or corporation in which the economic activity is a means towards creating significant social and or ecological impact that has public benefit. Often social enterprises are formed to address a specific societal need, but may also be committed to leading change in their respective industry. A social enterprise views its values as central to all aspects of its work and is committed to holding itself accountable in pursuit of its mission. Social enterprises may either be for-profit or not for-profit corporate forms, or a hybrid of both. So A few of the reasons that people choose to work with RSF. First of all, as Meredith mentioned at the beginning, RSF really is a relationship-based organization. When we are trying to change the way the world works with money, what we mean by that is we want to create direct, transparent, and long-term relationships with everybody, with all of our stakeholders, investors and borrowers and donors. So from the initial contact that you have with the lending team, through to underwriting and finally funding, the goal for RSF is to establish long-term trusting relationships with our borrowers. And then to take those relationships once originated and keep them around for a very long time and help these organizations grow. Another thing that is unique about RSF is that as a nonprofit financial services organization, we are not a federally regulated bank. So we don't have to necessarily play by all the rules of a typical banking institution. And as a result, we have a lot more flexibility around how we structure our loans and consider risks. So this allows us to provide funding to organizations that are not yet qualified for traditional bank financing. It also allows us to, I think most people hear about in the banking world that the work out, where when a company gets into trouble, banks' first priority is to close down the loan, liquidate the assets, and try and collect as much of the money back as possible. At RSF, we focus on work-throughs. That's not to say that loans don't go bad and we don't have to work through them, but what we spend an awful lot of time when companies get into a tough spot to help get them to the other side. We think it works. It's in everybody's best interest, but there's also a lot of times when a company has great opportunities, and because of being regulated, a lot of banks can't help their customers take advantage of that, whereas we have a lot of flexibility to kind of help our organizations capitalize on the opportunities in front of them. And then finally, with RSF, since we are such a relationship-based organization, we take a lot of pride in creating community around our financial transactions. And the most basic way that we do that is through our RSF quarterly pricing meetings. John Bloom, who is our VP of organizational culture here at RSF, opens all of our pricing meetings by saying, when was the last time your bank asked you if you wanted to know where your money was going, or asked you if you wanted to meet the people that lent you the money? I would say it always never happens, except at RSF on a quarterly basis. We do bring our investor and our borrower community together at a different place around the country, and I'll speak more about it in a few minutes. But the idea behind it is that by making everybody in a financial transaction known to each other, we can begin to understand the needs of each of the stakeholders and the needs of the larger community, and base our pricing on those needs, not just on a financial return.
All right, so what kind of loans do we offer here at RSF? We offer lines of credit where we'll lend against inventory and accounts receivable. We do equipment loans, mortgage loans, and then also construction loans. We're an asset-backed lender, and we just do senior secured debt. So our basic loan criteria, at the top of the list, you'll see mission fit. And here at RSF, we care equally about mission fit as we do with financial fit. And I'll go into that a little bit more in the next slide. The company also needs to be incorporated in the US and Canada, or Canada. Oftentimes the borrowers we work with are doing work internationally, but they have to be incorporated in the US or Canada for our financing. We also require 3 or more years of operating history, and an excellent history of repayment, both interest and principal, on any existing debt that the company may have. We also look for strong collateral. As I said, we're an asset-backed lender, so some of the strong collateral we look for are equipment or accounts receivable and inventory. And then another thing that RSF does that's a little bit unique is that we'll look to a community to help secure a loan through pledged communities. We'll have, a lot of times as Waldorf schools, we'll have a group of investors from the school community invest money with our social investment fund while the loan is active here at RSF. So the enterprise also needs to be profitable or can demonstrate a clear path to profitability in 12 months. And then the annual revenue target is 1 million or greater. And then for arts organizations, we look at organizations of 500,000 in revenue. Some more on the mission criteria. So we look at social and ecological impact for public benefit. So basically we ask ourselves, is the organization's economic activity a means towards solving or alleviating the challenges in the 3 focus areas that I mentioned previously? An advocate for change. Does the organization advocate for or demonstrate social change in its field? Is the leadership committed to the social mission? And does the organization measure or communicate the impact quantitatively or qualitatively? We look to see if a company is capable of accomplishing its mission. Is the model that they're using replicable or have the potential for scale? Can they have impact beyond just one community? And does the organization have the capacity to tackle the problems that they're trying to solve? We also look for financial sustainability, looking at management to see if they're committed to growing a profitable or self-sustaining independent enterprise. And then can they show us that they've asked themselves the tough questions about their business model? And lastly, we look at the community that they're able to create. How are they building the community along with their business model? Next, we'll talk about due diligence. So once a borrower meets the previous criteria, we go through a due diligence process to determine if they're a fit. It's important for us to understand the nature of the business and the sector in which it's functioning. And then we do a detailed financial and mission alignment analysis. As I mentioned before, we look at both of those pieces. It's equally important. We also greatly value the importance of site visits. So we'll go and visit a potential borrower, meet with the entrepreneur, the owners, the team, the management team. It's a really valuable way for us to see the passion that the company has and the work that they're able to do. And then we also ensure that there is the adequate security or collateral to make the loan. And this, as I mentioned, can be equipment, a building, or accounts receivable and inventory.
So I'm going to take a few minutes to talk about how RSF sets its prices, because it is absolutely 100% different than any other financial organization, and it's also central to how RSF grounds itself in its mission and purpose statement, which is to change the way the world works with money by creating direct, meaningful, and transparent relationships among all of our stakeholders. So the interest rates for loans through our social enterprise lending program are set on the basis of an independent benchmark called what we call RSF Prime. So I'm not sure how many people know how interest rates are set in the typical banking world, but ours are not different. It's more about how we go about setting them that is very different. So all banking institutions are going to have their cost of capital, which is also their rate of return to their investors. At RSF, you can see here that right now ours is, we go by basis points, so 25 basis points or 0.25%. Something else to remember, we call our investor, we call our the folks that put money at RSF investors, but really the vehicle that they're investing in looks a lot more like a 90-day bank CD. So if you look at CD rates in the US, we are about on par with the rate of return for other 90-day notes out there in the financial world. So then with most banking institutions, they then will add a spread on top of their cost of capital that will get them to their prime rate for their borrowers. At RSF, we're a nonprofit organization, and our lending program accounts for about 70 to 80% of our entire organizational budget. And so most of that money is made up in RSF spread, which right now is 4.25%. And what that spread makes available to RSF is, one, independence. Most nonprofit organizations that rely heavily on grants usually mean that they are also, how their organization operates and who they serve is beholden to the folks that gift them the money. At RSF, the fact that we're able to earn so much of our annual income allows us to operate pretty independently. So as I mentioned, the spread is 4.25%, and that in addition to the investor's return gets us to RSF Prime, which is 4.5% today. So we host quarterly pricing meetings in order to give our investors and our borrowers an opportunity to become known to each other and to also express their needs. So this is one of the things that RSF doesn't offer that can be a little hard for people to wrap their heads around is we don't offer fixed pricing. On working capital lines of credit, that's pretty traditional in most banking institutions. They don't offer fixed pricing, but for equipment financing or term loans like mortgages, fixed pricing is very standard. And at RSF, for us, we feel it's really important to be honest with ourselves about the needs of our community. We need to be checking in with everybody frequently. So these quarterly pricing meetings will inform how we reset our prices every quarter. Our prices haven't moved all that much relative to how the market has moved, but it's something that we can't necessarily offer a certain rate, a fixed rate over 5 or 10 years. So in the process for setting our rates begins in our pricing meetings, and in keeping with our values of interdependence and direct, personal, and transparent interactions. You can see from these photos, every quarter we invite our investors and our borrowers to take part in a facilitated discussion with RSF staff to discuss what the rates will be and how those rates will meet the needs of all of our stakeholders. And what happens in this room doesn't set the rate, it informs our decision making back at the office around how we're going to reset our rates. RSF started these pricing meetings quite a while ago, back in 2009. Again, one of our core values is to create direct, transparent, and meaningful financial transactions. And most financial intermediaries base their pricing, their cost of capital, on something called LIBOR. And RSF did for a very long time as well. And during one of our study groups, we have these kind of book clubs in the office where we will study different theories around our work, and we were studying Steiner's associative economics, which RSF is based on. And in our conversation, somehow a light bulb went off, and we realized that by using LIBOR, we're not living in alignment with our values, which is to create transparent, meaningful relationships. But it actually, using LIBOR, goes against our values. So in 2009. Right in the middle of the financial crisis, we decoupled ourselves from the market and started this community-based pricing model, which, if you've paid attention over the past couple of years, turns out LIBOR is the least transparent number in our financial system, and that for many, many years, the big banks had actually been essentially rigging it to their benefit. So that was a validating moment for us. Just to note quickly on the historical performance of our rate, over the past 7 years. It's available on our website. I mentioned that it has moved, it has stayed steady relative to the market. And while sometimes quarterly price changes and pricing based on community needs can be a little bit difficult for people to wrap their arms around, our rate has fluctuated very little, and I think is much more stable. In fact, in the financial crisis around 2008, 2009, we had an uptick in investors because people were pulling their money out of the markets that they didn't trust and putting it into places that they felt like they could trust and have more visibility into. So, like I mentioned, our quarterly pricing meetings bring together investors and borrowers. So we have borrowers all over the country and investors all over the country. And we try to go to the places where we have concentrations, where people can really come together and have a meaningful conversation. The typical size of the meetings includes 6 to 7 borrowers and ideally 6 to 7, sometimes upwards of 9 investors. We host them, we'd love to host them everywhere in the country, but because of the concentration of investors and borrowers, they tend to be East Coast and West Coast focused. So we'll do 2 here in the Bay Area during the year, and then we'll do 2 on the East Coast. If we had more people in, say, the Denver area, we would absolutely go to the Denver area or Texas, but it has been largely dependent on where we can get the most number of people in a room together to have the conversation. And because we feel like it does end up excluding so many people that are not whose businesses are not on the coast, we're actually going to pioneer our first virtual pricing meeting coming up December 1st of this year. If you are an existing borrower or you are an existing investor and you have interest in participating in that virtual pricing meeting, please get in touch with us or flag it in the question box because we'd love to send you information about it. So I'm going to move away from the RSF pricing meetings and talk a little bit about how to prepare if you're just starting out and interested in a loan from RSF. So I'd say that if you're thinking about approaching RSF or you're thinking about approaching any financial institution, there are some things that are going to be tremendously helpful. First of all, you've got to keep good records. We see so many companies that come to us that don't fully understand how their financials tie together, particularly around how their inventory and cost of goods sold tracking affects their balance sheet and their P&L and their margins. So keeping good records, high integrity records, is going to be really important because, again, I mentioned earlier, or maybe Meredith mentioned, that we will work with companies that are within 12 months of profitability, whereas most banks are looking for profitability, if not in the recent past, at least 3 years of profitability. When we're talking to companies that are pre-profitability, the way that we're able to lend to them is primarily by looking at how well they've tracked a budget in the past and how much we can depend on their projections in the future. So keeping those good records is going to be so crucial. The second piece is building a good team. I think that you hear it a lot from equity investors that it's all about management, but I have to tell you that from a lending institution that cares about the mission and values of an organization, the team is equally important to us. Meredith mentioned that we will do a site visit for every single new loan that we make, not only because it's important to us to understand the passion around the business that these entrepreneurs have, but it's really important to us to kind of get a gut check. We have once that I can think of gone on a site visit where we, at the end of it, handed back the deposit for that loan because we finally met the entrepreneurs and the organization and we felt instinctually that it wasn't a good fit for us. That almost never happens, but building a good team that cares about the organization is really important. Start small and start now. Mostly, I would say start now. So at RSF, I'd say that some people express an interest in a loan and the stars align and we're able to work with them immediately. But more often than not, we meet an organization that isn't quite ready for lending from RSF. But if we get to know you now, we can track with you over the however long it takes till you are prepared. And once we're ready to work with you, the process is a lot easier. So I'd say that a lot of the people that we meet that we don't lend to immediately takes about 2 to 2.5 years before we make that loan. So starting now and building that relationship is going to be really crucial. The final thing is that ownership matters. So I've been kind of on a rant lately around what it means to bring different types of capital into your organization and the people behind that capital. So RSF is a values-aligned lender. We do care that when we are lending to you, that the other people in your organization also care about your mission, because part of our goal is to preserve mission through the growth of the business. And when you bring in equity investors in early stages that don't care as much about your mission, they mostly care about the payout in 5 years when you exit, that's not going to serve you, and RSF is going to really consider what your cap table looks like when we're making the loan. And you shouldn't only care about it because we care about it. You should really care about who is in your business, because they are going to, once you get into bed with somebody that is giving you equity, you can't, Greg from White Road Investments does this all the time, you can't get a divorce. There is no legal separation. There's no legal process you can go through to separate yourself from an equity investor. So once you take those folks into the fold of the business, they're with you for the long haul.
Great. So now how to talk about if you've started out and now you're ready for RSF. So what do you need to do now? So first of all, it seems pretty obvious, but know what you want. What kind of financing do you need? Do you need a line of credit, an equipment loan? How much are you looking for? This is all important for us when we have our first conversation with you. And also, we need to as I mentioned, we do a financial analysis, and so we'll need to see financials. Historical for the last 3 years, our balance sheet, P&L, cash flow, and also the projections for the length of the loan that we'll be making to you. If it's a line of credit, that would be just for the 12-month period, but if it's an equipment loan, we'll need to see projections for the length of the loan, maybe 3 to 5 years. You also should be able to show or address the lender's 2 biggest questions, which for us are, do you have collateral and can you pay us back? Really important when we make a loan to a company. It's also valuable for us to see that the company knows the risks of the business and show us that you're addressing them, or at least are aware of the risks out there for your industry. And then do a competitive analysis. What's your competition look like? Why is your business unique? What are you doing differently than others? And key to this is, the mission piece. How is your mission fit with RSF, and what are you doing to make the world a better place? So now we're going to go into specific examples of borrowers in our different focus areas. So education is one of them, and RSF started in 1984 by making loans to Waldorf schools, and so Waldorf schools make up a large part of our history and our portfolio now, but we also support organizations in the education space that aren't schools, like PlayWorks. And PlayWorks is a national nonprofit that sends trained full-time coaches through an AmeriCorps program to provide safe, healthy, and inclusive play and physical activity for school kids. So they reduce bullying, and their mission is to improve the health and well-being of children by increasing opportunities for physical activity and safe, meaningful play. They're a wonderful organization, and they serve more than 900 schools in 23 cities across the U.S. And they wound up reaching more than 500,000 students directly. RSF's loan to PlayWorks is helping them bridge a gap between school payments and then the money. So they basically contract out with schools, and so we help them cover the gap between when they get their grant money and when they have to pay the school. So this is a great organization, and we're happy to be supporting them. An example of an organization in the arts space is 18th Street Art Center. They were founded in 1988, and they're based in Southern California in Santa Monica. And they're an artist residency program. So the organization provides artists with space and time to take the risks in ways that further the development of their art making. And it provokes public dialogue through contemporary art making. It's the largest arts organization in Los Angeles, and is the largest artist residency program in Southern California. And RSF's loan to them allows them to refinance their existing mortgage on this property that you see here in this picture, and provides funds for their reserves. So ecological stewardship. You'll see here the picture of Recycle Force. They're an awesome organization based in Indianapolis, and they're a social enterprise offering comprehensive, innovative, responsible recycling services while providing life-changing workforce training to formerly incarcerated individuals. So they're a true, wonderful social enterprise. They take e-waste and other recyclables from residents and deconstruct them, recycle them, and dispose of the waste safely and cleanly. And our loan to them helped provide the large object you'll see in the back of the people. It's an industrial shredder, and that has dramatically increased their capacity to recycle materials.
I believe they refer to it as the Beast.
The Beast.
The Beast.
and a fitting name.
So shifting over to food and agriculture, RSF's food and ag work covers a lot of territory. So I'm going to give 2 examples. The first is what we call the CPG category, consumer packaged goods. We're really interested in working with organizations that where we're going now with food and agriculture on the CPG side is we're really interested in working with organizations that are highly integrated into their supply chains, and they're creating value for suppliers, producers, and consumers. So Modikas right now is one of our absolute favorite borrowers. This company was founded in 2008 by 2 former Peace Corps volunteers who worked for a few years in Madagascar in the cocoa industry. And Madagascar is the only company producing high-quality bean-to-bar, hand-wrapped chocolate and vanilla products on the continent of Africa. So every process in the Madagascar chocolate value chain happens within the borders of that country. I don't know, I mean, so Africa as a continent, one of the reasons that it is so impoverished and kind of stuck in this cycle of poverty is because we tend to extract raw materials from the country without creating any value around those products within the country. So Madagascar not only works on the fair trade side with producers, with farmers to pay them more, pay them living wages, provide shelter in exchange for them using growing techniques, agricultural growing techniques that put back into the ecosystem through properly harvesting and growing the products under the shade-grown trees, which is how cocoa normally is grown there. But they also own and operate a manufacturing facility where they provide close to 100 highly skilled jobs in the country. So everything that comes over to the States has already been processed and hand packaged. And so they're keeping 100% of the operational revenue of that organization, of the company, in the country of Madagascar. So we are a really big fan of this company. And what RSF did, what we do with a lot of these food and ag companies, is we provided working capital line of credit. So especially for folks whose supply chains are internationally based and focus on creating value through job creation or high integrity growing practices, they have to pay their producers quickly because farmers traditionally don't have a lot of money, and when they produce their product, they need to sell it to turn it into cash. They can't necessarily hold on to it. So part of Madagascar's value add is that they buy everything they can from their farmers when it becomes available. But when they buy it, they have to process it, turn it into a chocolate bar, put it on a ship, send it to America, hold it in inventory, sell it to Whole Foods, and then wait 30 to 60 days before it gets paid for. So the amount of cash that has to be put out in that period of time between when they buy it from the farmer and when they finally get paid by Whole Foods is really long. So working capital line of credit helps to bridge the cash flow needs of the organization during that period of time, so they're not constantly running out of cash. And that's one of the primary ways in food and agriculture. That's one of the biggest needs that we see in food and agriculture, especially on the consumer packaged goods side. So the other organization that I'll talk about is kind of the other spectrum, on the other side of the spectrum of what RSF's food and agriculture portfolio is looking for. So while we're really focused on companies that are selling products that are creating high value and high integrity supply chains, we're also really interested in rebuilding our US-based food system. So as many of you know, over the past 50, 60 years, our food system has become consolidated and industrialized, and as that has happened, it has pushed a lot of the small and medium-sized producers in this country out of work. It has also totally disintegrated the infrastructure of that food system that used to help move the food from small producers into communities. And right now, small producers, most of them go directly to markets by way of farmers markets or CSAs. But if we ever want to shift the needle to support those people that are producing organically and in on small family farms, and we want to support more of that and decouple ourselves from industrial agriculture, we need to find ways to actually move that food. And food hubs, I don't know if y'all have heard that term, is one of the ways that that's happening in the U.S. And Eastern Carolina Organics, or otherwise known as ECO, is a really great example of a food hub that RSF supports. So ECO is based in North Carolina, and it was started in 2004, originally as a project of the Carolina Farm Stewardship Association, but has since then grown into its own organization that is a private farmer and worker-owned for-profit company whose mission is to support emerging organic farmers and organic tobacco farmers while improving the supply chain of local organic produce in North Carolina. So as I mentioned, ECO is a food hub that essentially aggregates food from a lot of small farms or farms that are interested in transitioning from conventional growing practices to organic growing practices. And then they sell that food and distribute it to wholesale organic retailers, restaurants, and buying clubs. So ECO currently works with over 40 growers throughout the state and 100 customers in the greater Raleigh-Durham area. And again, one of the biggest needs that we've seen here on the food system side is also the need for a working capital line of credit. So what we're able to provide to ECO is a line of credit that lets them pay their farmers within 7 to 14 days, which is absolutely when people should be paying farmers, and bridging the cash flow gaps before they get paid from schools, hospitals, or folks like Whole Foods and retailers. So we also wanted to share two quick success stories. RSF has a tremendous amount of success stories. I think that over our 30 years, we have a loan loss rate of 2% or less, meaning that 98% of our portfolio has been successful, and we have borrowers that stick with us for a very long time. We also have borrowers that have become so successful that they actually outgrow us. As Meredith mentioned in the beginning, we can only lend up to $5 million, and currently when a company has a financing need greater than $5 million, there's actually no or very few lenders in this country that are values aligned that can lend that amount of money. So Nutiva here on the right-hand side, they're a fair trade company that works to import fair trade materials like red palm oil, coconut oil, hemp seeds, a lot of products that are produced around the world and are generally produced using really terrible agricultural practices like slash and burn techniques, as well as working on major plantation size farms where the workers are not treated very well. So Nutiva has worked to both support the organic and sustainable supply chain of these products, as well as support the fair trade practices by paying workers and farmers and co-ops a living wage and improving their livelihood. Nutiva is a success story to us because when they came to us, I think that we made about a $500,000 loan at a point when they likely weren't bankable anywhere else. And within 5 years, they had grown tremendously to the point that we actually couldn't service their debt anymore, and they had to go out and find a $15 million line of credit. So to us, as I mentioned in the beginning with our definition of a social enterprise, one of the ways we define a social enterprise is that as their sales grow, their impact grows. And so Nutiva is a phenomenal example of the impact they're able to have in the world just by growing their sales. On the left-hand side, Ceres Community Project is another phenomenal borrower, and totally on the other side of the spectrum. They're a nonprofit organization that's based here in the North Bay in California, and they were founded to, one, get kids into the kitchen, teach them how to cook, and help them to understand what good organic food does for our health, and then prepare those meals and serve those meals to people and their families who are dealing with primarily cancer, but terminal illnesses. So one of the things, Catherine Couch, the founder, says that when folks are dealing with terminal illnesses, it's not just the person with the illness that is impacted or affected by it, it's the entire family. And so they will provide organic, healthy, beautiful meals for an entire family while somebody is going through, while someone is going through their process. And getting kids into the kitchen to teach them how to cook organically and to deliver those meals and have that connection to people that have that need is incredibly powerful. And one of the things that has happened over the past several years is people have caught wind of this business model and what a beautiful thing it is, and it's actually been replicated several times throughout the country. So another great success story for us is when there's a model that really works and has multiple touch points and then gets replicated successfully across the country. So those are just two of our many, many success stories in our portfolio.
Thank you. Thank you to both of you, Kate and Meredith. It's always very inspiring to hear about the great work that our borrowers are doing. That was great timing. It's We have now 20 minutes left for questions. So those of you on the line, if you do have questions, please type them into the chat box. And if you don't see the box, you can click on the orange arrow and it should expand. We do have a couple questions coming in already, but just note there's now about 50 people on the line. If we don't get to your questions, we will email you afterwards with a response. So to get started, there's a question here around our integrated capital approach, which is not something that was mentioned in this presentation, but it is something that has come up in various newsletters and articles in the press. So if you could talk a little bit about why we've adopted this integrated capital approach and why it's so important.
Sure. So integrated capital, for those on the line that haven't heard about it, it's something that RSF actually I think has probably been doing for all 31 years of its existence, but in the past several we've become much more formal. So the need arose a lot through our food and agriculture work. So when we see companies that need a loan, particularly when we're working in food systems, the companies that we look at oftentimes don't just need a loan for a piece of equipment. You look under the hood and you look at their financials and you understand what they're trying to do through their business model, and you quickly understand that making a loan is only one part of their need. And oftentimes that loan needs to be coupled with grants for technical assistance. They also, sometimes in companies, need a little bit of equity to cushion their balance sheet in case there's a shock to the business. And over the time RSF has been working in food and agriculture, we've noticed that our traditional social enterprise lending program was unable in a lot of ways to serve the needs of those organizations that we thought were going to be incredibly innovative and potentially impactful to transitioning our food system towards something that looked a lot more like regionally based, high integrity growing practices. So our integrated capital approach, right, what we've been doing for the past 3 years is we have the ability to look at an organization, usually one that comes to us for a loan, and apply different types of capital to that organization based on the needs that we see. So I'm trying to think of a good example. Lately, we've been using the example of Hudson Valley Harvest. They are a food hub in the Hudson River Valley of New York. They're a for-profit organization, and they work with a lot of small farmers in that area, bring the food in-house, and they either distribute it wholesale or they'll actually process that food into one of the things that they make is this really great blended frozen kale smoothie that gets sold at Whole Foods. So it adds shelf life to the products. It also adds more value to the product so the farmer can actually make more money on that product. And as I mentioned in the webinar, one of the big needs that we see for these food hubs is that they need working capital. So 3 things I say a food hub needs at a very basic level is they need a truck to move the food, they need a place to store the food, and they need the working capital to pay the farmers before they get paid by the school or the retailer. You can get a truck almost anywhere. You can lease warehouse space without having to needing credit or business track record, but a working capital line of credit you can only get from a financial institution. There are some exceptions to that, but where food hubs are in their development right now in our sector, they're young, they're low margin, their collateral is not very good the way a bank would consider it. Frozen meat or perishable vegetables is not very good collateral. And so they're really, that need is really unbankable. So RSF, it's also unbankable to RSF in our social enterprise lending portfolio. So RSF started 5 years ago the PRI portfolio, program related investment portfolio, that actually can work specifically with food and ag companies that have a need, but they might be riskier. And so we've actually been able to provide a different, still a lending product, but a slightly more flexible product. And we started doing a lot of work there with our food hubs. And even there, we realized that the companies that needed our support either were too risky even for that portfolio, or they needed different types of capital. So we started then the Local Initiatives Fund, which is our first integrated capital fund. It's a several $1 million philanthropic fund that we can use to provide almost any type of capital that's being called for. So with Hudson Valley Harvest, we provided a line of credit for them, but because the collateral is not very strong, we used some of the money from the local initiatives fund to apply a loan guarantee so that we could make the loan so that it would fit within our risk profile. We also provided some technical assistance to bring a nonprofit in that could help them think through how they were accounting for their inventory and cost of goods sold, and how managing that contributed to their margins, and how their margins contributed to the profitability that they were hoping to see in 12 months. We also have used some of that money to provide equity investments, very small equity investments. We're exploring using some of this money to provide subordinated debt. So the idea behind integrated capital is to really be able to look at an organization, understand more holistically what their needs are, and use both the funds that we're raising and also bringing in people in our network to actually wrap around these organizations and provide appropriate capital to help them get to where they need to be. That was really a long-winded way of answering that question. I'm sorry.
That's okay. And I would just add that RSF is well positioned to take on this integrated capital approach and deploy different types of money because of our experience with lending and philanthropic dollars.
Yep.
And equity investments. So next, Meredith, if you want to address this one. The question is what we look for during our site visits. A little bit more detail. So if you could walk us through what a site visit might look like.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, it's really having a conversation with the team, the management team, meeting the CEO, meeting the COO or other project managers, and finding out about their vision and what they're looking for, what they're looking to do in the next few years, and really having that one-on-one time to see, how they're responding. I don't know, basically to get a good sense of who they are as a people, who they are as a company, where they're going as a company. And then also to see the work that they're doing, I think is really powerful, whether that's looking at their office space, seeing how their workers are treated, seeing how everyone jives together as a team, and looking at some of the collateral perhaps as well. That's what a traditional lender does, and we also are interested in that piece. Looking at for a food hub, looking at the warehouse space that they're in. If they're a school looking for a new mortgage, taking a tour of the space that they're planning on moving into. So I guess it's a bit of looking at the physical space and also getting the one-on-one time with the entrepreneurs and the team on hand.
Yeah, it's our site visits are fairly casual in that we don't have, depending on the site visit, it's not a specific agenda. It really is so we can get a gut check on the management team and the organization and make sure that the way that we've been feeling about it while we've been having conversations is the way we feel about it when we're there. We'll oftentimes also try and have conversations and meetings with other people, other stakeholders in their kind of in the fold. So oftentimes we'll meet with board members, we'll meet with farmers that are supplying these organizations, we'll meet with customers that are buying the products. So it's really to get a sense of the community around the business.
Very thorough and fun too.
And really fun. And we may ask to sleep on your couch.
That's not a joke. So as noted earlier in the webinar, part of our criteria is a revenue of $1 million or more. So the question is, where do you recommend smaller, earlier stage social enterprises turn for financing?
So it depends on what focus area you are in. I will say if the organization is a food and agriculture focus area and you're more food systems based than you are product based, then we can look at, because we have the PRI program, we can look at organizations that have revenues of $500,000 or more, because those loans in the PRI program run from anywhere from about $50,000 up to $360,000. So we can work with smaller organizations. But if you're looking for other options, so we've found a lot of people have success with their local, well, there's local banks and then there's local CDFIs. So CDFIs are community development finance institutions that exist in most communities, and they have a mission to bank the unbankable, or bank small businesses that are slightly too small. And some of them are kind of look like your typical bank, but some of them are doing some really awesome work. If you are in food and agriculture, there are groups like Whole Foods or your local Slow Money chapters have, some of them are more active than others. Let's see. There's also really interesting web-based platforms that people have had a lot of success with. And Circle Up, for example, is a place where you can put your company up, identify the amount, and they'll actually try and match you with investors. Let's see. Kiva. Yeah, Kiva Zip is doing some really interesting work right now, really good work. There's a lot, and it depends on what type of company you have. I'd be happy to take that question offline too, if there's a specific need.
Great. Another one here is, do we, RSF, utilize our own proprietary model for underwriting the loans, or do we partner with another financial institution?
So at RSF, we do everything in-house. It's certainly not proprietary. RSF as a nonprofit and as a social enterprise, we are focused on being pretty open source about everything, but we do, on our lending team, we have a credit team that underwrites all of our loans. We are trying to move towards, we hear from a lot of individual investors or smaller investors that don't have the bandwidth or the structural capacity to have an underwriting team. We've had people approach us and ask us if we would either do underwriting for them or share our resources. We are trying very hard with our PRI program to dial in the underwriting and credit analysis so that we can share that with the world in terms of what we're looking for, how all the spreads that and all the calculations we make. So 2016 is our goal to actually open source some of our underwriting materials.
That's great.
Yeah.
Do we
Surprise.
Receive requests?
A lot.
Yeah.
We receive a lot of requests from people to either they want to pay us to do it for them, or they want us to teach them. And unfortunately, we are a pretty small staff here, so we're going to try and share our tools with the world. So hopefully more people will be able to do it.
Cool.
Yeah.
Meredith, maybe you could take this next question, because Meredith actually recently transitioned from our client development team to the lending team. And this question is asking more about the investors. So maybe what the social investment fund opportunity is and what our kind of typical investor looks like.
Yeah, so we have over 1,500 investors in our social investment fund, which is our only investment option here at RSF. And it's a note program open in 47 states in the US and a couple provinces in Canada. And you can invest at least at a minimum of $1,000 in this fund, and you receive a rate of return of, when Kate was showing that slide previously about the pricing model, it's 0.25% right now, 25 basis points goes back to the investors. And what's unique about our investment fund is that it's open to accredited and non-accredited investors, as I said, $1,000 minimum. And it's a 90-day liquidity, so every 90 days the money is available for you to draw from. And this fund allows us to do the loans in our core loan portfolio, social enterprise lending. So it's a way for investors to see where their money is going, and it's part of our transparent, personal part of our work.
Yeah, even though it's a 90-day note, I think our average investor stays with us for 6 or 7 years.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So,
thank you. This question's a little long, so bear with me for a second. Are there examples of good government policy, regulatory frameworks, or incentive structures that have been useful or that have helped you max your lending to good businesses?
No.
Have we partnered in any way?
So we have voluntarily not participated in a lot of government programs. So we are less knowledgeable about government policy and how it impacts our opportunity to work with social enterprises. There are a number of federal programs out there, like the new market tax credits, USDA or SBA guarantee programs, that I think RSF, because we're not a bank, we're a non-traditional lender, so to participate in those programs is a lot of heavy lifting, and frankly, there's just so much demand for our loans that we've chosen not to participate. And so as a result, we just don't know, as we're not experts in what is out there and what's available. We have participated on a few new market tax credit deals, largely as a participation. So a bank that does a lot of new market tax credits will often bring us into the fold, but we don't necessarily have the expertise to be doing new market tax credits all day long. So sorry, that's not a very satisfactory answer.
This question's around our competitors. Who else is lending to social enterprises?
So many people actually are lending to social enterprises these days. We find, so there's a couple of different ways to answer that question. So on equipment financing and on term loans like mortgages, we find that there is a lot of competition, largely because we cannot offer fixed rate pricing over a long period of time. We're not as competitive as banks. So if there's an organization that qualifies for $1 million loan for a mortgage, there's often a lot of just regular, regional or national banks that we're competing with. On lines of credit and with companies that are within the 12 months of profitability, we are seeing quite a bit of competition from groups like New Resource Bank, which are smaller, values-aligned banks that are really interested in this sustainable food space or eco-stewardship space. We're seeing a lot of competition on smaller loans from really small funds trying to fill the gap. So I'd say like Fair Food Fund out of the Northeast, very good friends of ours, but we come across each other on deals all the time. There are CDFIs like CEI out of Maine or Northern California Community Loan Fund that we see a lot. So in general, I think we know where our sweet spot is, but it's heartening and a little, it's interesting to see how many people are coming into this space to provide financing for social enterprises.
Overall, a great thing.
Overall, a great thing for the space.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I think we can take one last question, and this one is about financial statements. So if someone's getting ready to seek a loan with RSF, what's required for their statements? Do they need to be audited? Do they need to be reviewed by anyone other than their auditors, or what stage should they be at?
Yeah, I can answer that. We'll take internally prepared financials. Compiled or audited is obviously preferred, but we understand that for a lot of small businesses that are just starting out, they haven't gotten to that level required for an auditor. Nonprofits often already have audited financials. And we'll also ask for tax returns when it's an internally prepared statement, just so that we can verify that information. And as I mentioned before, we'd like to see at least 3 years previous, and then also the projections forward for the balance sheet and P&L and cash flows.
And for how many years projections?
For the length of the loan.
Yeah, so I'm so sorry.
No.
If you're looking for a line of credit, those tend to be 12-month terms, so we would want to see at least 1 year of projections. If you're looking for equipment or term loan, that's going to be a 5-year loan. We're looking for 5 years of projections. 5 years is really hard to project, and it's really hard to rely on, but we want to know that if you're going to have our money for that long, we want to know that you've thought about what the business is going to be doing for at least that long.
Great, thanks. Thank you for all the great insights, and thanks to all of you for participating in the webinar today. We didn't get to all of the questions, but we do have them here, so we'll follow up with you directly. Thanks again. The contact information for myself, Kate, and Meredith is up on the screen right now, so if you want to jot that down and reach out to us directly, please feel free to do so. Thanks so much. Have a great rest of your day.